when I was first learning how to drive, my dad would often drive with me. And he used to joke with me and say, "Do as I say, not as I do." In other words, don't follow his example of how he drives, because it might not line up with what he's trying to teach me in the road. But in all seriousness, he's a fine driver. He would just say that as a joke. And as I was thinking about that phrase, "do as I say, not as I do," it reminded me of the Pharisees and Matthew 23. It's a chapter of the 7 woes to the Pharisees and religious leaders, and Jesus very bluntly calls them out. In a few verses before Matthew 23, in Matthew 22:34-40, Jesus is asked by the religious leaders, what is the greatest commandment? And Jesus essentially says this: love God, love others. This is the heart of all the laws and all the prophets. But what we see, or what we have seen in Matthew, is abuse of the law. The Pharisees missing the heart of the law, making it about following rules and showing themselves to be very religious. Jesus calls them whitewashed tombs for it in 23:27-28. They weren't pretty, they just looked that way. They looked nice on the outside, but on the inside there was sin and there was a lot of uncleanliness. So a house may look good from the outside, but if you leave issues run too long in a house, it's going to start to rot, there's going to be mold, there's going to be decay. And Jesus is calling out the Pharisees on their hypocrisy. They flaunt around, seeming religious, following law, doing all the right things, but they've neglected the weightier matters of the law: justice, mercy, faithfulness. They lost the heart of the law, which is to love God and love others. They neglected the poor, the oppressed, the needy. They actually looked down on Jesus for being with sinners instead of having compassion on them. They despised Jesus for healing a man's hand instead of wanting to see him be healed. So what can we take from this passage? We can be aware of the gap between what we believe and the reality of the way that we live. Would we be able to tell people to do as we do, or just do as we say? Do we say we follow Jesus, but neglect to help those on the outside? Or do we put God on the throne and let His love guide us to love others?